Okay, let's get right into it. We're about to talk about one of the most important people of the 20th century, a guy you've almost certainly never heard of, but whose work you are using literally every single second you're online. This is the story of a true hidden genius.
So, to start things off, I want you to just look at the screen for a second and think, what on earth could possibly connect the three things I'm about to show you? It seems totally random, I know, but trust me, there's a link.
Okay, so what do we have? Juggling, a flame-throwing trumpet, and your smartphone. Yeah, I know. Two of these are just whimsical, kind of absurd, right? The other is one of the most sophisticated pieces of technology ever made. The answer to what they have in common isn't a what, it's a who.
And that who is Claude Shannon. You see, to understand the mind that basically architected our entire digital world, first you have to understand the man. And let's just say he was anything but conventional. And no, this is not an exaggeration. His colleagues at the legendary Bell Labs would just see him pedaling down the hallway on a unicycle, often juggling a few objects at the same time, just as a normal part of their day. He was so into it, he actually wrote a formal theorem on the mathematics of juggling. Of course he did. His mind was just always going, always building stuff. He had this room at home just filled with gadgets he'd made himself, things like a trumpet that shot actual flames. And get this, a wearable computer, way back in the 1960s, that he and his wife, Betty, designed to predict roulette wheels and get an edge in Vegas. This was a mind that just absolutely loved to tinker and to play. So, you're probably wondering, how does this juggling, unicycling, gadget maker become the father of the digital age? Well, let's switch gears to his academic life, because behind all that playfulness was a truly staggering intellect. What's with the number 2? Well, that's how many bachelor's degrees he earned at the same time, from the University of Michigan. And not just any 2 degrees either. One was in electrical engineering, and the other was in pure mathematics. And that combination, that fusion of the practical and the abstract, that would define his entire career. And then, after Michigan, he goes to MIT for his master's. And in 1937, at just 21 years old, he writes a thesis that decades later people would call this the single most important master's thesis of the entire century. So what on earth did it say? So here's the crucial leap he made. Before Shannon, electrical circuits were pretty dumb. They were just about power, on, off. A current flows or it doesn't. But he saw something completely different. He realized that the on-off state of a switch was a perfect physical model for something called Boolean algebra, a type of logic that runs on true or false. And what that meant was that circuits could do way more than just turn on a light bulb. They could actually think. They could make logical decisions. That one insight is the absolute bedrock of every single computer chip ever made, period. So, with that revolutionary thesis under his belt, Shannon's journey takes him to Bell Labs. And it was there that he would have his single greatest insight, one that was so profound it would take the rest of the world decades to really fully appreciate it.
You can see the progression right here. That thesis in 37, that was the spark. But his 1948 paper, A Mathematical Theory of Communication, that was the explosion. And what's just wild is how long it took for the world to catch up. He was just that far ahead of the curve.
In fact, his ideas were so radical that when he first presented that 1948 paper, some of his own brilliant colleagues at Bell Labs, we're talking some of the smartest people on the planet, had this reaction. They thought his theory, which laid out the fundamental laws for all information and all communication, was just too neat, too elegant, and too powerful to possibly be real. And in that very paper, he gave a name to the core concept of his new science. He coined the word bit, short for binary digit. It is the fundamental atom of all information. That basic unit of a 0 or a 1, a true or a false, that underpins absolutely everything you are seeing and hearing at this very moment. Which brings us to his legacy. A legacy that is, at the same time, immeasurably vast and, for most of us, completely invisible. He basically built the foundation, and today we all just live in the house that he designed. But here's the thing about the man himself. He never sought fame. Unlike so many other scientific giants, Shannon was intensely private and he was deeply humble. He wasn't driven by getting recognition or awards. He was just driven by pure, raw curiosity.
There's this one story that just perfectly illustrates who he was. Late in his life, he decided to show up at an information theory conference, and the researchers there were just floored. They treated him like an absolute rock star, lining up just to get him to sign copies of his old papers. And Shannon? He was reportedly just delighted, happily chatting with the very people whose entire careers were built on his work.
So, when it's all said and done, where do we place him in the history of science? Well, many people in his field put him right here, in the same pantheon as Newton and Einstein. Because, like them, it wasn't about a bunch of small discoveries. It was a single, unified theory that completely rewrote the rules and changed the course of human civilization forever.
And this is why it matters so much to you. His theory was basically the blueprint for achieving perfection in an imperfect world. He proved that you could take any information, pictures, sounds, text, anything, turn it into bits, send it perfectly across a noisy, error-filled channel, and then rebuild it flawlessly on the other side. Every single email you send, every video you stream, every digital phone call you make, it's all a direct result of Claude Shannon's information theory. He was a genius who would rather build flame-throwing trumpets than attend press conferences. And that kind of leaves you with a final thought, doesn't it? If the father of our entire digital age could be a juggling unicyclist hiding in plain sight, what other geniuses might be all around us right now, quietly changing the world while we're not even looking?